Welcome to the fourth session of the Habitech Insider Series. Today we're talking all things Wisdom Audio. I'm joined by Barry Pym and Steve Rutherford from Wisdom. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome.
Let's keep this really simple. For those that don't know about Wisdom Audio, would you mind giving a bit of a background to yourselves, to the brand, and what it is that set you guys apart from every other speaker brand?
Yeah, sure. With pleasure. So Wisdom Audio is approximately 25 years old now as a company. It was founded by Tom Belander and David Graebner. And we're based in Carson City, Nevada, which is the capital of Nevada on the west coast of USA. Our facility is both design and manufacturing all in-house. So all of our products are designed there and they're built there, which is phenomenal. We're able to take control of the whole process from a quality control perspective. So we're one of the few companies that build our own drive units, for instance. All the drive units are built there. In the early days of Wisdom Audio, David Graebner, one of the founders, perfected the planar magnetic drive unit. He took that particular technology and brought it to a stage where it was a very, very high performance drive unit. And I'll just explain what planar magnetic technology is. So PMD, as we call it, planar magnetic drive unit, is a thin film transducer. It's unlike a normal cone or dome speaker. So it's a flat film with a voice coil bonded on it, suspended between magnets. And that type of transducer technology gives us phenomenal speed and clarity, and we're able to build it into large-scale drive units, so both point source and line source, which is a particular technology we can talk about later, but it gives us a very clear advantage. But the reason we decided on that technology was speed and clarity. Unlike buying off-the-shelf cone and dome drive units, which are slow, we found with the PMD technology that we get phenomenal speed, clarity, dynamics, power handling. They have to handle a huge amount of power. And Wisdom Audio has developed from those early days, which was more hi-fi stereo speakers, into an architectural loudspeaker product. We found that our speakers, because they're very slimline, they can be built into walls. And the architectural market's now expanded to the point where people don't want to see speakers anymore, but they still want high performance. So we are one of the few companies that produce a huge array of in-wall loudspeakers that are truly hi-fi, high-performance quality. Whether it's cinema or music, the playback is irrelevant. And the loudspeakers can be on-wall, in-wall, or freestanding, but they all have the same performance. So that's quite a unique feature from any manufacturer. And the other thing is it's very scalable. So the technology we have can be, planar magnetic drive unit can be built into a very small speaker that can be installed in the ceiling, like our 3-inch minimal appearance speakers, right up to large scale, the LS4s that are in the other room, which is a full planar magnetic loudspeaker that covers 80 hertz to 20 kilohertz with one planar driver, which is phenomenal performance. And so the company today is very much larger than it was back in the early days. It's been applauded by not only architects and designers, but cinema designers around the world. The best cinema designers are using Wisdom Audio, and it's got a real good reputation for high performance, whether it's music or cinema, but the people love it for its architectural quality, the fact that you can build it into walls and make it disappear.
Touched on an important part there, which I think I'd like to expand on, which was the scalability of the brand in custom install. And that's everything from small systems all the way up to, as you mentioned, DCI compliant theatre. So would you mind just touching a little bit on the scalability of the brand, everything from the smaller systems up to some of the bigger projects that have happened around the world?
Sure. The thing with planar magnetics is, as if you rightly said, they are very scalable. So we're originally known for our larger theatres, but actually bulk of our business is in the smaller media rooms. And we have a whole range of speakers that are suitable for ceiling and in-wall mount. And the clients don't necessarily want to see large speakers in their living rooms. They want to see something that's hidden, architecturally friendly. And our range is based upon a whole, 90% of our range is in-wall or on-wall. And so you're losing very little wall space. And there's very few high-end speaker manufacturers out there that can actually achieve really good performance in wall. And we're one of the few companies that dedicate our speakers to do that. So it is very scalable from a very small 2.1 system that I think retail is going to be around sort of £7,000 for a 2.1 Insight system, all the way up to the largest media rooms and theatres, which could be well over £1 million. Still using the same technology, same performance levels, whether it's a small room or a large room. And that's one of the unique benefits, is no matter whether the speaker's very small or very large, you still have that beautiful sonic signature that you get with planar magnetic drive units, that speed and clarity. One of the points that I didn't touch on before is we can cover more of the frequency spectrum with the planar magnetic drive units than you can do with regular dome and cone speakers. So for instance, with our LS4 largest speakers, they're full planar magnetic. There's no woofers in there. So they cover 80 hertz to 20 kilohertz. So that's a huge octave range.
It's just from 8 octaves, right?
8 octaves. So it's massive without any cones. So there's no mass, it's just pure speed and clarity. And it means then that we don't have to have crossovers in this important mid-band region. We can cover, even like the speakers behind us, the old 75s here, they'll cover 350 hertz to 20 kilohertz with the planar driver. We don't want crossovers in the mid-band. Our ears are most sensitive in that mid-range section. That's all the vocal regions in music tracks. If you have a crossover in that region, it's typically bad for the sound. One, the crossover adds distortion, you get phase issues, and also you get different dispersion between a small dome tweeter and then a mid-range cone. Whereas here we're using the same drive unit to reproduce all the frequencies. So it's almost the perfect loudspeaker that you'd want to design. If you could have a loudspeaker that had one drive unit that went 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, you've cracked it. Fortunately, it doesn't really exist. But we're getting close to that. And that's what gives them the absolute speed and clarity. And coming back to scalability, yes, we can scale from very, very small to enormous systems. And anyone that's listened to Wisdom Audio will know that all the speakers have that same speed and clarity and sonic signature.
Yeah, for sure. And that's definitely feedback that we get from demonstrations is you don't even have to necessarily talk them through the background of the speaker. You can just play it and then say, well, what do you think of that? And they'll go, that's phenomenal. The fidelity you get, the clarity, it's just like they're in front of you. And that's always a great demonstration. If you don't have to give them a background on the product, they just listen to it and go, oh my God, that's amazing. It's a great demonstration.
Yeah, it's the ability as well to deploy a system in so many different ways, So just like the speaker behind us there, which is freestanding, the L75, the same product could also be wall mounted, but could equally be in wall. So could be completely hidden by acoustic fabric, really lending itself to being very interior designer friendly, and taking the product off the floor in the wall, but still providing that same level of performance that Steve was talking about, using PMD.
And I think interior designer friendly is a really important point for me, is looking after our customer base in London, along with Paul DeLocco. People do not want to lose depth off of walls. And the fact that we have very slimline but high output performance subwoofers is an absolute win, because they don't want to build out huge amounts off their walls. They're paying vast amounts of money for per square foot for property, and they don't want that to be taken up by wall cavities to hide speakers away in.
Well, it's this idea hidden high performance, right? That's really what we can offer with Wisdom.
Yeah, for instance, the L75s behind us here, when they're in wall, they're only 4 inches deep, so 10 centimeters deep. They play from 35 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and they fill a room this size with enormous sound pressure, but with amazing clarity. It's a true audiophile speaker that can fill really large rooms. So if you want to have a party with it, you're not going to break them.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal all-purpose loudspeaker.
Yeah, and all-purpose is absolutely correct, because there's not too many systems out there that will play music as delicately as Wisdom do, as well as being able to do the big loud crank, bash crang in reference theatre as well. So yeah, they're great. So talking about PMD, obviously we've spoken how it's faster, it's dynamic, it has great power handling. In terms of Wisdom subwoofers, talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about the design of those and how they came about to keep up with the planar magnetic drivers.
Yeah, that was something that we researched in the very early days of Wisdom Audio, that a lot of subwoofers are slow by their very nature. The cones are heavy, which means they take a long time to start and stop. Imagine a gunshot going off, the cone's got to move forwards, then it's got to stop, and then it's got to return. They've got a lot of inertia there, which tends to make them slow. The larger they are, generally the more mass they have. We wanted a subwoofer to match the speed of the planar drivers. You can see that, in the speakers behind us, the woofers are very small, but we use multiple woofers in that design. That means they're lightweight, they can start and stop quickly. When it comes to subwoofers, we want the same thing. And one of the designs that we researched in the early days is RTL, regenerative transmission line, which is not something we designed, but it's a design that's been around since like the 1950s, early 60s. And we soon discovered that type of technology gave us the speed and transient response that we wanted to match. So we have developed that over many, many years now to give us a whole range of slim but very, very high performance subwoofers. Ones that are fast and articulate that match the speed of the planar drivers. But also the other benefit of RTL technology is the way it's tuned is they can play down very, very low in frequency. So even our smaller SCS2, S90 subwoofers, they're flat response down to 20 hertz.
Yeah, incredible.
And that's in an in-wall subwoofer that's 6 inches deep.
Yeah, and that's a true 20 hertz as well.
It's a real 20
That's not
hertz.
spec sheet trickery.
That's measured, and anyone can come in here and measure it.
Yeah.
It's flat to 20 hertz. In fact, it's a large tuned design, and the lowest frequency tuning is 20 hertz on those, which is phenomenal. When anyone comes and hears them, can't believe it. So you can have a fully hidden subwoofer in a 6-inch depth wall that will give you speed, articulation, and for movies, they will hit those very, very low frequencies with great authority.
Yeah.
And that design is scalable right up to our larger STS subwoofers, which we've got in the big cinema room here. They're phenomenal. They have a sensitivity of around 100 decibels for 1 watt, very high power handling. They're flat to 18 hertz, and those things are just incredible. But when you play music on them, they're such a musical, fast subwoofer. You wouldn't know you're listening to a subwoofer.
I always say that to people. I say it's unfair to call the STS a subwoofer. It's a tidal wave generator.
Yeah.
The output of that thing is bonkers. But like you say, it's whilst yes, it is massive in terms of its physical size, it's incredibly delicate. And it wasn't until I became more experienced and listened to various different systems that actually you start to identify layers in the LFE with Wisdom subs that previously I hadn't heard before. And once you've heard that, you almost can't go back. It's a bit of a spoiler for you, in my opinion, anyway. So let's talk a little bit about the Wisdom partnership program here between yourselves and us as Habitech. What is your role really, Barry, day to day, to give a bit of insight on the pre-sales specification, system design, that sort of thing?
So really, I'm here to support yourselves at Habitech, Charles. So here to support you, but also your dealers as well. So that could be anything from running a demonstration for a dealer and one of their customers here in Basingstoke at the showroom, all the way through to helping to design rooms based on what could be really quite basic information, all the way through to more detailed sort of CAD drawings. So helping to put together different specifications. And that could be for a fully blown home theatre system, all the way through to media rooms and quite basic 2.1 systems. But finding ways to incorporate the products into those projects to ensure that we're providing the best possible performance. Because for us, it is about providing that level of performance to the end user. Clearly, when they're purchasing a Wisdom system, generally speaking, they're probably spending quite a bit of money. So we want to make sure that anything that we do and anything that is deployed in the customer's property is done in the right way, which then also feeds into our commissioning system as well. So we are able to help and support the dealers with calibration. So we can actually come out and calibrate the room specific to the equipment that's in there, using a number of different tools. And Steve's more kind of au fait with those than me.
I've never seen Steve more excited than when he's walking into a cinema that he's not been into before with his bag of tricks and calibration equipment.
It's all about the calibration, right?
He loves
Steve?
it.
It's all about the calibration, yeah.
It is.
And it's just adding that level of refinement to the system, which is just so needed, and often could be overlooked.
Yeah, and it's a night and day difference. It's not, they out the box. So even to my untuned ear, I would listen to a pair of L75s that are just set up, no room EQ, no nothing, just the PEQs put in, and I go, they sound great. They sound really good. And then Steve works his magic, or Craig, or yourself, and then you come back in 5 minutes' time after there's just a very quick calibration. You go, oh my God, that's like a different pair of speakers. Yeah. And then give Steve 6 hours with them, and when you flick the calibration on and then off, it's like it's a completely different system. It's phenomenal, the difference.
And again, it bridges back to what we were saying earlier about the ability to use a speaker in a different way. So, the calibration for a freestanding speaker will be different to something that's in the wall. So yeah, that's really critical.
Barry touched on a good point there that there's certain things you can't calibrate for. You've got to get the design right. The speaker placement's got to be correct, which is why Wisdom Audio have always helped with the design of our systems. And Barry now has taken over that role of system designer. And it's very important that we get to look at the designs at the early stages so that we can make sure that speaker placement's correct. The height, if it's line source, that the height of the line source speakers are correctly situated. And so on, because once the speaker's in, we can't change the position generally. It's the same with subwoofers, and because you use REW a lot, so you cannot just put a subwoofer in the room and expect it to perform well in the listening position. There's a lot of factors there. So subwoofer placement, listening position placement, and then it comes down to room acoustics, as you know, with room treatment as well. That's such an important part. If you can get speaker placement correct, you get the technical aspects of selecting the right speakers, which again Barry will help with our quote process. So you get a good, better, best situation. We're never going to underspec a room. We're never going to put a speaker in there that's not going to perform well. So select the right speakers, select the right location for the speakers and subwoofers, the right partnering equipment. Room acoustics then, as you know, with Cinematech, as you do here, is so important. If you get all that right, the calibration process is a lot easier at the end because you've got all the fundamentals right. Now, you don't always get the perfect room. A media room, for instance, you can't put that much treatment in compared to cinema room, where you'll have fabric walls and so on. You can treat it. Yeah. So again, you get the fundamentals right, but then that's a bit harder work when you've got acoustically a bad room. And again, you can't fix it all with calibration, but you can do an awful lot to help.
Yeah, for sure. And I think going back to the partnership side from Habitec's point of view is that we are maybe known for being quite protective of Wisdom, but it comes from a good place, and it's for the right reasons, is that we understand the caliber of the product, and we really feel passionate about working with the right people to ensure that project is specified correctly with your help, with your help, Steve, and Craig, and making sure that it's installed correctly. It's not just thrown in and lashed in and it's calibrated properly to ensure that once that client sits in the seat and listens to it for the first time, they have a big smile across their face and they're blown away by it. And that, as a result, we do have to be quite selective about who we work with, but I think it's for all the right reasons. It's not to be elitist, but it is a premium high-performance product, and it does take a certain caliber of installer to install it and specify it. And don't get me wrong, it's not that we don't want to be helpful. We will help anybody that wants to be helped, but it's just there's a business conversation to be had there. So on the subject of calibration, Steve, we've worked over the last sort of 6 months or so on tweaking the calibration service that we offer. Would you mind explaining, what happens? What do you get for the Wisdom certified calibration?
Yeah, sure. So we offer a factory chargeable calibration service, and that is a full system check with calibration, with before and after report as well. So just explain what the procedure is. We wouldn't start calibrating until we've checked everything in the system. So are all the speakers hooked up to the right channels? Then the next thing we'll be doing is buzz and rattle checks. We're running sweep checks to make sure things aren't rattling in the room. If you've got rattles in the room, you can't really calibrate through that. So we'd be fixing things like that. Hopefully we would work with the dealer to get that done beforehand, so we'd do all the checks there. We'll do polarity checks on all the speakers. It's very easy to get the polarity of a speaker wrong, and it's just the way things are, especially with big multi-channel systems. So we'll do polarity checks. Once all that's done, then we'll take some measurements, capture what the room's doing before we calibrate, and then whatever calibration system it happens to be, doesn't matter what brand of calibration system it is, but we'll run calibrations. I'll do an independent screen capture of the room. We'll be able to, if required, measure things like RT60 of the room. And at the end, there'll be a certificate saying it's a factory calibrated system. And also the client will get a copy of the Wisdom Audio coffee table book, which we've recently worked on together, but I know Habitech have done a huge amount of work, which is on the table here, which is a phenomenal book, and it's a phenomenal resource to give. So it's just a really nice gift presentation to the customer, which can't be bought. So it's if you buy your Ferrari, you get maybe a book with it or whatever.
Yeah, I think maybe if you don't mind me just interrupting there, it's probably worth explaining a little bit for those that have seen it or maybe heard about it but don't know it inside out. So the actual book itself, and I've got to be careful the way I say this because I know some of them will not be watching on video, is the book itself, whilst it does give a bit of a background on Wisdom Audio, who you guys are, it's not all about planar magnetic drivers and RTL subs. It's a little bit of a background on, I suppose, high performance audio and theatre, and then really it's actually some very, how do we say, probably prominent members of the sound design industry, sound directors, who have written really nice pieces on particular films they've worked on. It's probably important to point out for those that have maybe heard about it or seen it but haven't read it, is that it's not all about Wisdom Audio products, is it? There's a bit of a background on there about high performance theatre and high performance audio, but there are a number of Oscar-winning sound directors in there that have written pieces on films that they've had a really crucial part on and have won awards off the back of it. So it's a really nice gift to give to someone who's got a Wisdom theatre and has paid for that calibration service, that you get the before report, you get the after report, and you get the book that talks a little bit about sound design. It's just that nice little part of the white glove service, isn't it? So I think it's really important to point out that actually the Wisdom calibration isn't just clicking through Dirac and then pressing save.
No. And whoever's coming out to do it, to do the calibration, will have had years and years of experience in listening to the Wisdom system. So we know what they should sound like, and if it's not right, we'll stay there until it's right. That's the thing. We know what it should perform like, and it's a question of verification, because you can click through any automatic calibration system and it says we're done, and is it really? Because no one's verified it. So we will verify it. and we'll do a lot of extensive listening tests. And if it's not right, we'll stay there till it's done.
Yeah. Yeah, and an important real-world example of that is our Wisdom Theatre, wasn't it? You used Dirac and then measured it after and thought, oh, that's made it worse in this occasion.
It's Dirac. I have to say the new version of Dirac Live 3 is phenomenal, and it works very, very well. But then there's always some small after tuning that's required, and yes.
And because your cinema's gone through so many iterations as well, I think we're on the third version now, aren't we?
Third version of equipment.
Yeah.
Every 8 months, we've worked out.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty much every 8 months.
Okay.
Jonathan likes to think it's about every.
So that gives you another 6 months now, does it?
It's every year really. Yeah, it's going to be line 3s all round now.
Yeah.
Cool. So there's a little bit about the calibration service. That's great. So we've spoken about quite a few different topics. One that is quite exciting as it changes up the installation, changes up the kit list, so to speak. Anyway, it makes things a lot easier for us. Is the new DSP amplifiers. Now, some who attended our Wisdom Dealer Conference in July know all about these, but there's a lot of people out there that don't. Mm-hmm. So would you mind touching on why the DSP amps have come about and what significant design changes does this bring to the table?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, some years ago, Wisdom used to have a product called the system controller. And the system controller was there to provide a number of features above and beyond what our amps were able to do. We've taken a lot of that functionality and now built it into the amplifier. So now we've gone from having 2 boxes to just 1, which makes a lot of sense from an installation perspective and cost as well. So we've taken a lot of the processing ability that we were doing in the system controller. I've now built it into the into our new SA2, 3, and 8 DSP amplifiers, meaning that we can now connect our amps up to our speakers and do all of the crossover within the amplifier, together with some room EQ and some quite pretty cool stuff at the calibration stage. So those products have just started to ship, or the SA8 DSP has just started to ship. The SA2 and SA3 DSPs will be a little bit later on in the year, but they should be this year.
Great.
So yeah, a lot of very good things to come as far as that's concerned. But we'll have 2 products which will run side by side. So we'll have a non-DSP version, but then a DSP version, depending on the installation and what the dealer is looking to achieve.
Great. Good stuff.
So just to expand on that, just to give you a use case scenario. So, the speakers behind us, the L75s, there's no crossover in these. They need 2 channels of amplification and a external electronic crossover. Now, if you're running a high-performance surround processor up front, like a Storm Audio or something, you can do the crossover in that product. If you've just got a stereo system, like a name streamer or a preamp, for instance, that you're never going to have the ability to do an electronic crossover in that. So what it means is now you can use our DSP amp. So for instance, here you could use 2 SA2 DSPs, 2 channels for each speaker. And as Barry was saying, the crossover and the EQ is done in that. So you could have a very simple but super high performance system by having something like a name streamer as the source preamp, plugs directly into a Wisdom Audio SA2 power amp, and we can then plug directly into these speakers. So we're now providing crossover, parametric EQ, bit of room tuning, all in the power amps.
Great. And that was before, now we're saving on rack space because we no longer have the system controller.
Yeah. And we can also not only accept an analog input, but also a Dante input as well.
Yeah.
So now if we've got Dante connected devices on the network, we can take those inputs and then output to our speakers, which is, again, another pretty obvious benefit.
So Dante's an interesting topic. It's a bit of a buzzword in the industry at the moment. And Wisdom really, certainly in high-performance audio, I would say, are one of the early adopters of that technology. So what is it about Dante that you guys and the design team at Wisdom have gone, that's for us, we would need to incorporate that into our products?
I mean, for distributed audio systems, especially very large distributed audio systems that are in super yachts or a very large property, no one wants to be running analog cables all over the house. With Dante, it solves a number of things. You can run multiple channels at high quality, 96K for instance, and the whole house can then work over an Ethernet cable effectively. So that makes the distributed audio system a lot simpler to deploy. So the larger properties tend to be now going all to digital audio over IP, and Dante is one of the best solutions to do that. You'll also see surround processors going that route as well.
Yeah, Storm have.
So for instance, Storm have their AES67 output card, which is Dante compatible. So you could have 32 channels from a Storm Audio surround processor. So instead of having 32 analog cables going into power amps, which is a nightmare for making it neat in a rack, you're basically just using Ethernet cables, and that gives you much simpler connectivity, and then it's kept in the digital domain all the way down to the amplifier. So the DACs are in the amplifier, and we use very, very high quality ESS Sabre DACs in the power amps. So it's a major benefit. Of course, we still have the analog inputs as well on the amplifiers, as well as Dante, but Dante definitely is seen as the future for large-scale distributed audio, large-scale multi-channel audio.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, for those that don't know about Dante, it's really incredible technology. 512 inputs to 512 outputs in sub 1 millisecond latency. It's really good. It makes a lot of the analog way that we've been working in for many years look quite antiquated. But I think it's an important topic to speak about, because I would say traditionally in hi-fi world, analog is the way. That's the way it's always been done, and people like to spend lots of money on their cables and changing bits and bobs. But as a high-performance audio brand, you've actually gone digital, which I find, capability of going digital, which is an interesting topic. We spoke a little bit about point source versus line source speakers, and certainly the technology behind them with the PMD. So the L75 is behind us in a problematic acoustic environment like this. We've got hard floors, there's a lot of reflection in this room. What are the benefits of line source speakers in a room like this and at larger home theatres?
Yeah, so that's, you've heard line source and you've heard the benefits of it. So just to explain, a point source speaker is a drive unit that radiates 360 degrees. It radiates in all directions, and the sound expands as a sphere, and so the sound will bounce off the sidewalls as it expands, and it will also bounce off the floor and ceiling. As it expands away, it loses a lot of energy, a lot of power. So a point source loses 6 decibels every time you double the distance away. So most loudspeaker manufacturers give you a sensitivity measurement at 1 meter. So say it measures 100 decibels at 1 meter maximum. So you move from 1 meter to 2 meters away, you lose 6 decibels. And then from 2 to 4, you lose another 6 decibels. So at 4 meters away, you've lost 12 decibels, which is huge. It's a lot.
Is it your ear that perceives 9 dB as half volume? Is that correct?
9 dB is double or half, yes.
Right.
It's a lot. It's a lot. So a line source speaker, so this is a pure line source speaker behind us. A line source speaker doesn't radiate sound in all directions. It's a beam, basically. It still will bounce off the sidewalls, but because it's a focused beam of sound, we only lose 3 dB per doubling of distance. So we're not expanding as a sphere, so we're not losing energy. So 3 dB per doubling of difference makes a huge difference. It means the sound up close and also a further distance is very much more consistent than with a point source. So that's a really good benefit of line source. The other benefit is we're now not bouncing sound off the floor and ceiling, because we now have this parallel beam of sound. So we cut out potentially half the reflections in the room. So a room like this, which is very echoey, there's no treatment in here, we now won't be getting floor and ceiling bounce, which means you hear more of the speaker and less of the room, which equates to more clarity. So it is a massive benefit if you have acoustic spaces that are less than ideal. And that's a lot of living room spaces, open plan media rooms, etc., etc. And you've heard the difference. You put a standard point source speaker in this room, it really won't sound that good. There's too many reflections in here. I can hear my voice bouncing back from multiple surfaces. You put the line source in here, yeah, you cut out 50% of the reflections. So it is a huge benefit for rooms where the acoustic treatment is not great, and but also for cinemas as well, because you're getting fantastic power over distance, and it means, especially with multiple row cinemas, your front row and back row will have very, very similar sound pressure levels, so perceived sound power levels. So that's also a win as well.
The biggest difference that I noticed when we switched the side and rear channels from point source to line source in our Big Wisdom, our flagship theatre, was that when you sit on the outer edges,
Yep.
you can hear the opposite side channels, which before I personally couldn't.
And you're not being blasted by the speaker that's next to you, right?
Exactly, and it was that way before. So that was one of those sort of moments of realisation. I remember the first time, Steve, you did the Wisdom training and you pointed out the line source versus point source speaker, and you said, yep, the sound travels out in this beam, and if your ears aren't in that beam, you're not going to hear mid or high frequency. And I remember thinking, what a load of rubbish. And then I got up on the ladder and thought, oh God, this is weird. Because until you've experienced it, it sounds like witchcraft. There's no way that you can control sound like that, but it really does. It's one of those things that has to be heard to be believed, I suppose.
It is true, and very few companies can produce a line source sound, a pure line source, because if you look at the drive units, they have to be, you're looking at one tall, thin drive unit, and very few people can do that. A lot of companies try to mimic line source by using something called line array, which is multiple point source speakers, which are all positioned very, very close to each other. But with line array, there's a lot of negatives to the sound performance, and one of them is all the drive units which are now interfering with each other, causing comb filtering and distortions and so on. Whereas pure line source is very hard to achieve, and with planar magnetic drive units, we can do that. We can build a pure line source loudspeaker. Line array will never give you the pure beam, and certainly close up, there's just way too much comb filtering to make it sound really nice.
So is it the L75 as an example behind us, those panels instead, yes, whilst they're two separate panels, when they're put together, they're behaving as one drive unit? Is that what you're saying? One
flat panel drive unit, yeah.
All right, cool. Good stuff. Thank you very much, Barry and Steve, for joining us. Really great to talk to you today. Appreciate you giving up your valuable time. I know we're all busy. And yeah, thanks very much.
No problem at all. Thanks, Charles.
It's been a pleasure.